All right, well, welcome everyone to today's Process Mining Academy session focused on automated findings, which is available as of the Vancouver release. So automated findings are complementary to the existing rule-based finding definitions some of you might be familiar with. Those are the things that come with the out-of-the-box content packs that we provide. The big difference between the two is that with the existing finding definitions, you had to kind of know what you were looking for ahead of time. These automated findings will start surfacing process inefficiencies and potential improvement opportunities that you might not have even been thinking of. Before we get started today, I'd also like to mention that this happens to be our 20th Process Mining Academy session, which is a nice little milestone for us. The ServiceNow process mining team, of course, really appreciates your continued interest and the support of these sessions. All right, before we get to the main course, let's quickly get the logistics out of the way. The purpose of these sessions are to help us all get better educated on ServiceNow's process mining capabilities. We'll provide how-tos, practical guidance, use cases, product updates, and just as a group, exchange ideas and collaborate so we all continue to get better. How the sessions work, as some of you know, we've got a scheduled topic that we'll cover usually for the first 30 minutes or so. Then we open it up for questions on the chosen topic for that session. Then we'll open it up for questions that go above and beyond what we've just been talking about, sort of like an office hours. These sessions are recorded and they eventually get posted on the community. So you can find the complete library of the prior 19 sessions out there if you're interested in doing deeper dives in any area of the product. And then as we go through this today, please post your questions in the Q&A section. We answer them as quickly as we possibly can. And then for those situations where we don't have an answer for your question immediately, we typically follow up and post those answers in some form of a blog post or just on the Academy session itself in the Process Mining community page. This is the slide that says, hey, anything we say and do here today can't be held against me in the court of law. It's also the slide that says, as part of these conversations, if we make any forward-looking statements about what may be coming in future sessions or releases, sorry, not sessions, but releases, you should take those as forward-looking statements. Make no purchasing decisions based on them whatsoever, because things are always subject to change. And I'm assuming you've read the fine print. All right, for those that I've not met before, my name is Dan Grady. I'm part of the process mining product team here at ServiceNow. What we'll do here today, as always, we start with the quick process mining 101 for our newcomers. And then we'll dive into the topic, right? We'll do our automated findings. There's 3 specific automated findings that we'll cover here today that are available in the Vancouver release: rework, ping pong, and extra step. We'll talk a little bit about what goes into configuring those automated findings. Super easy, but it's good to know where to find the things you can potentially adjust. We'll jump into a quick demo in an instance, so we'll show you an example of each of those 3 findings in action. Then we'll also go look at the configuration screens. We'll get your questions answered. We'll just finish up with some additional resources that most of you are probably already familiar with, but if this is your first time, you might not be. And then we'll get you out of here. Should be a pretty quick session today. All right, as always, the quick process mining 101 for the newcomers. With everything we do, there's a design and desired path in our minds for how it should work and how things should play out, whether that be one of these planning something like one of these academy sessions or a business process. And when we design things, we design for both efficiency and the completeness to provide the best experience possible for as many people as possible. Now, unfortunately, what we design isn't always what ends up happening in reality. The reality is that not all the work is going to be flowing through the process, taking the optimal path, and that's going to have a negative impact on the experience that both the employees requesting service might be having, as well as the people that are trying to deliver that service. Now, unfortunately, identifying what is actually happening within any one of our business processes and then improving them isn't always that easy. What process mining allows us to do is use the audit log data that is generated as records move through a given workflow or process. And then we can use that data to create a visual representation of what is actually happening within a process. And this new level of visibility is going to help us accelerate our ability to identify inefficiencies, non-conformant process activities, and improvement opportunities. So process mining gives us the ability to answer process questions that have historically been very challenging to answer. So whereas the more traditional analytics that we're used to will help us answer a lot of the what questions about our processes, process mining helps us answer the whys. So things like, where is our process getting stuck? Where is any unnecessary rework happening in the process? Where is work ping-ponging between different groups? Or where aren't we conforming to the process that we've designed? All things that have historically been difficult to answer and act upon, they're now available to us in just a couple of clicks using process mining. We always like to say that process mining is going to get you to the why behind all of your process KPIs. And in doing so, empower everyone involved in the process to make data-driven decisions about which improvements to make. And we can apply process mining to a single table like this incident example here, or we can take a multi-table approach. So if you think about a process like requests that has both requested items with the approval steps that you might want to be looking for bottlenecks in, as well as all the tasks involved to complete or fulfill the request. You might be looking for bottlenecks inside of there. You can create these multi-dimensional maps. And actually, that's going to be the topic for our next session is multi-dimensional maps. But you can create these multi-dimensional maps to start looking for opportunities and these types of processes. Another common multi-dimensional example is an HR lifecycle event like onboarding, where you have a high-level event or case, and then a whole bunch of tasks and requests that come off of that. And now, as of the Vancouver release, we can actually apply process mining to data that's imported into the platform from external applications, like this hiring example that we have on the screen here, in which we imported some data from Smart Recruiters. All right, now our topic today, automated findings, happens to be particularly useful for external data or App Engine-based processes where we don't offer out-of-the-box content packs with pre-built rule-based findings. So some of you may be familiar with finding definitions, right? For those that aren't familiar with finding definitions, as I've mentioned a few times already, they're rule-based. They allow us to set up specific criteria that we want to look for in the data we are mining to identify inefficiencies. So for example, we might configure a finding definition to look for incidents that go directly from resolved and closed and never move into an open or in progress state. Or maybe we want to configure a finding definition to look for cases that take longer than 2 days to route and less than 2 hours to resolve once they've been assigned. Both of those scenarios would be good starting points to look for automation opportunities. Maybe we configure a finding definition to look for work that touches group A, then goes to group B, then for some reason comes back to group A in less than 24 hours. Does it really have to go to group B in the first place? The idea is that you can use finding definitions to test hypotheses and gather important data about the impact of certain scenarios to help prioritize which improvement opportunities to act on. Now, we also provide some of these pre-configured finding definitions as part of the workflow-specific content packs that we offer via the store to help you get started. And there's an Academy session specifically focused on finding definitions if you want to go deeper. I think it might be the 4th one that's out there. Now, what about the process inefficiencies that are occurring that we haven't thought of, right? Like, this is where automated findings come into play and help complement the rule-based finding definitions. There are common process patterns that we can detect and surface for you as part of your analysis. And in the Vancouver release, we introduce our first set of these automated findings with our rework, ping pong, and extra step detectors. These are going to accelerate our ability to find opportunities to improve and reduce some of the manual effort that goes into our analysis. And we're going to cover each of these individually today. And just so you know, we've starting with these 3 in Vancouver, but there are 3 or 4 more of these automated findings slated for the Washington release due out early next year. Now, the first one we'll look at is rework. Rework is defined as a repeated action or process step, right? Sometimes they may be necessary, but many times they represent an opportunity to improve and remove some waste from the process. So essentially with rework, we're looking for things that go from, let's say, A to B to C, and then at some point go back to A for some reason. Right? So think reopened work or work that is going from in progress to awaiting caller info and then back to in progress. When we were thinking about rework, we were thinking about repetitions at the activity or node level, right? So if you think, I say activity or node, For those that aren't familiar with the terminology, those are the ovals on the map. So we're focusing on seeing things go into an oval on the map more than one time. Now, with ping pong, we're focusing on repetitive arcs or transitions on the map. So looking for work that is bouncing between two process steps, or a more likely use case would be bouncing between assignment groups. So identifying work that's going from group A to B, then back to A and back to B in a loop. This type of bouncing can have a big impact on productivity. Even if it's just a handful of hours in each transition, they all add up. And they aren't something that you're going to want to see in any sort of, these are the types of things that you're not going to see in any sort of report that you're running, right? You could have a whole bunch of KPIs and reports. They're never going to be able to show you this repetitive bouncing back and forth that's impacting your overall closure or resolution times. Now, the extra step is an interesting one. And if anyone happens to be watching the Marvel show Loki on Disney Plus, you're going to love this one, because we get to talk a lot about variance. What are we doing with the extra step detector? Or what we're doing is we're looking at all of the different routes or variants that work has taken to get to closure. Then we start comparing those routes and identify situations where we have a certain route and then a variant of that route that has just one additional step in the process. That step, again, could be a necessary one, or it might not be. But the idea is that we'll surface these situations and the productivity impact of that extra step, so you can start digging in and finding ways to eliminate the unnecessary ones. So we may have a situation where the ideal path for work to take is A, B, C, E. But then we find that we have a variant of that route that goes A, B, C, D, E. And when work goes through that D step, there's an additional 4 days added to the closure time of that piece of work. So like, why are things going to that D step? And can we avoid that happening and reclaim some of those additional 4 days? So the ability to surface these extra step variants, pretty powerful. So those are the 3 automated findings that we've added in Vancouver. Now, as you can imagine, because we are automatically detecting and discovering these opportunities, we have the potential to generate significantly more improvement opportunities than in the past with just the rule-based findings. So in order to help organize and make these things more consumable, we've updated the summary and insights page in Vancouver, right? So this just, again, designed to help us make it easier to consume all of these new potential improvement opportunities that we're going to be surfacing. So when we start to configure your findings, both the rule-based ones and the automated ones, you're going to be able to align them now to a category, as well as certain performance analytics KPIs that these findings will potentially impact. So this will help us to focus, right? You may choose to focus on findings that are impacting your closure time KPIs first, and then sort these findings by the volume of records or the total impact. As we always like to say, there's going to be no shortage of opportunities to improve your processes, and having the data you need to help you prioritize where to act first is really, really important. Now, in terms of configuration, where do we configure automated findings? Well, just like the rule-based finding definitions, you're going to configure them in the process configuration record for the table that you want to mine. So you'll see an additional related list in the process configuration record. And to add or adjust these, you need to have the process mining admin or power user roles. And you might be saying, Dan, you just said process mining admin or power user roles. The slide says process optimization. As most of you know, in Vancouver, we made a name change, but to the product itself, but underneath the covers, the roles still have the same name there. Now, configuring an automated finding is pretty easy, much easier than the rule-based finding definitions that you've worked with in the past. The first thing you need to do is you need to pick your type of finding, rework, ping pong, or extra step. Then you pick the category that you want for the finding, whether it be quality, conformance, performance, or automation. And now I'm often asked about these categories, and there's simply a way to help you organize your findings. Completely up to you what you choose. The only impact they have is how things are going to be grouped on that summary and insights page. So you may want to choose to categorize a rework finding on the state field as quality, because it will be flagging work that is has to be done a second time. And if the quality of the work was better the first time, we wouldn't have to be doing it a second time. You may want to flag ping pong as a performance category because it's slowing us down. Extra step findings on state, you may want to categorize as conformance because they could be situations that aren't aligning to the design path. It's really up to you how you categorize. So that's just something people often ask, like, what does this do? It's just about categorization. You'll need to pick the field or activity you want to apply the automated finding to. Most likely it's going to be state or assignment group. Then align the finding to certain KPIs. This is not required, of course. You may not even be using performance analytics. If you're not, right, if you don't align it to a KPI, you just might have some empty space on one of the widgets on your summary and insights page. Now, for those of you that are saying to yourself, we don't use performance analytics, but we like the idea of aligning it to key performance indicators for organizational purposes. One idea is that you might want to use performance analytics manual indicators as placeholders. So for those that are not familiar with performance analytics, there's different types of indicators. Automated indicators are things that actually run and collect data from the platform itself. But there's a type of indicator called a manual performance analytics indicator that simply allows you to create an indicator, a KPI, a metric, and then you can type in the numbers if you want. But it's an easy way to kind of create a placeholder, say, hey, you know what, this is going to impact MTTR. So if you're not familiar with them, dig into manual indicators. Then the last thing that you have the option to configure is a few parameters for your finding. You notice I've set this slide up for rework and ping pong. Their parameters are the same and pretty straightforward. You'll configure a minimum, that's easy for me to say, minimum repetitions value. So in the example here, we only want to surface the situations where the rework happened 2 or more times. So it went back to the state of, let's say, in progress 2 or more times. And the maximum findings, that's how many findings do you want to surface on the summary and insights page. In the example here, we'll surface the top 10 in terms of total productivity time. So I often get asked about this. Total productivity time is the number of records times the duration that you're seeing on the screen. Okay, I know we've been on this slide for a little while, but like in real life, it takes a matter of minutes to create an automated finding. I just wanted to call out all the individual pieces. All right, now for the extra step detector. There are a few more parameters and they are a little bit more confusing if you choose to play around with them. You can configure different minimum and maximum ratio values. So you have a main or a parent variant, and then you have the extra step variant. The first parameter is the ratio that sets the minimum number of records an extra step variant needs to have in relation to the main or the parent variant. So in the example on the screen, we have a value of 5, which sets a 5-to-1 ratio, meaning that the minimum number of records needed for an extra step variant to be flagged would be 20% of the parent variant. The second parameter sets a minimum number of records an extra step variant would have to qualify to get flagged as something we would put on the summary and insights page. So in this case, if there aren't more than 100 records in that extra step variant, it's not going to qualify. We're not going to surface it on the summary insights page. Now, just like the first parameter, we can set a maximum ratio for the extra step variant. So if we set this value to 1, it means that an extra step can have up to 100% of the number of records the parent variant can have. If we were to set this to 2, it would be up to 50% of the parent variant. So let's see, math isn't my strong point, but let's say if the parent variant had 500 records and we set this value to 1, we could have 500 records in the extra step variant. If we set the value to 2, the extra step variant could have up to 250 records. Now, the minimum step is exactly what it says it is, the minimum number of steps needed to qualify as a variant. The important thing to note on this one is that it includes the created and end steps in the count. So if you're thinking about steps in your head like new to in progress to on hold to resolved to closed, I think that was 5, you would want to set a minimum. You would need to add 2 more as your minimum because created and process end would be included in that count. Now, I don't anticipate anyone touching these initially, and you shouldn't have to touch these initially, but as people start getting deeper, I wanted to make sure that the recording had some explanation in it for what you're going to see here. All right, let's jump on over to the instance itself. And hopefully I haven't timed out. We'll take a look at a couple of different examples. So the first one we'll look at is this rework example. So we'll come in here. In this case, I've mined my 27,000 incidents or 21,700 incidents. You'll notice the updated summary and insights page where we've got our improvement opportunities overview, where we're grouping things by the category that we're setting, the types of records by the different types of opportunities, as well as our linkage between the KPIs that we've got there at the summary level. Then as we move down, we get to the list of improvement opportunities. And I can come down here and I'm going to find this one that's rework on awaiting caller info. And I can see here rework on awaiting caller info, the max number of times that something went into awaiting caller info. We had at least one record that went into awaiting caller info 9 times. There's 343 total situations in which, actually, if I click on this, it'll tell us, right? Rework on caller info, rework refers to a repeating step, just like we saw already. But to apply for this improvement opportunity, the record needs at least 3 repetitions between a node. The node repetitions can be interrupted by other nodes, so 3 times. So in this case here, I have 343 incidents that went into the awaiting caller info state 3 times or more, and one even went 9 times. Here's the KPIs that we've aligned this to, that this potentially could be impacting. Here's the average duration of those 343. Here's the total inefficiency. So those 343 times the average duration gets me to this 9 years. And now we could go in here and say, I want to look at in the workbench these 343 that went into that awaiting caller info state 3 times or more. And it will narrow it down. And what we can see here, we've got our 343 records. One interesting thing to do, just to kind of point out what we've done here, is if I click on this awaiting caller info, let's just hide this. Click on this, you'll notice with my repetitions histogram, the distributions start at 3. And that's because we're only looking at tickets that went into the awaiting caller state, info state, 3 times or more. And here's our 1 or 2 that went into it 9 times throughout. So you could always use the distribution piece here, the repetitions, to kind of answer some of these rework questions. But it's nice to have them called out on that summary and insights page. The other interesting thing to do here is, now that I've identified these, if I wanted to focus in on which assignment groups were the ones that are kind of involved in these situations in which we have to keep going back to the user for additional information, we just use our breakdowns. And I can see the majority of these that are going in and out of awaiting caller info more than 3 times have something, or in some point are touching this IT Support Americas team. Maybe we want to focus in on those. So that's the rework example. Let's come over here and look at this ping pong example. And in this case, right, I've chosen to set my project up with assignment group, very common. Assignment group as an activity, very common for the ping pong situations. I don't nearly have as much data, or poor quality data, if you will, poor quality process information, as I do on the state side. So I've got a number of different ping ponging scenarios here, but the volumes aren't all that high. And maybe I want to focus in on this one here, in which I've got things bouncing back and forth between my IT Support Americas and Support IT group. And I can see here, the way that we've set this one up is to apply for this improvement opportunity. The record needs at least 2 repetitions between the 2 nodes. So at least 2 times going back from IT support to Support IT to IT support to Support IT. Right? That's what was the qualifier. And these 4 records met that condition. Stats, same as before. And now if I wanted to focus in on these, I could view these in the workbench. And what we'll be able to see here, let's just bring this down a little bit, make it a little bit cleaner, is I've got these situations where things are looping back and forth between these 2 groups. One way to focus in on this, if you've not been playing around with the process mining workspace before, if you start doing your group analysis, it's always interesting to use the variation analysis piece to come in here and say, okay, there's my one example where I've got one record that took 1 month and 3 days to go from IT Support Americas, Support IT, IT Support Americas, Support IT, right? There's that transition that's repeating. That's what we were flagging with our ping pong detector there, or automated finding. In this case here, I can see that that transition happened. Let's just close this. I can see that that transition, IT Support America's Support IT, it actually repeated itself 3 times. And it needs to be consecutive for it to be caught by the ping pong. So IT Support America's Support IT, IT Support America's Support IT, IT Support America's Support IT. Those all qualified for that ping pong automated finding. So this is just a different way to look at it, but you can see what we're capturing in the data with the automated finding. Now, if we were to look at the extra step, let's use this hiring process data. So the external data that we imported as part of our last Academy session using our external data capability available to us in Vancouver. These automated findings really, really helpful for external data situations when we're importing the external data, because if you're importing data, we don't provide you any out of the box rule-based findings in some sort of content pack. So the automated findings are great for helping you get a real good understanding of the data that you imported and where the initial opportunities might lie. So here, if I come down on this, we've already looked at rework. Well, let's look at this extra step detector, right? So we find this one situation where I have these 259 records. And what it's telling me is that offer pending is an additional step between interview and offer approved, right? So it's looking at the different variants of the routes, and it found the one that we've got kind of this extra step between. So it's kind of easier to see this if I bring this into the workbench. And when we narrow it down in the workbench, it's going to show us only the 2 variants, right? So if I build this out, it's going to show us both the parent variant and the extra step variant here. So I can see here's my parent variant. Let's close this, right? The one that kind of we looked at first, created, sourcing, interview, offer approved, filled, right? And that was on average taking 2 months and 2 days, 7 steps. And then here's the 259 that have that one additional step, right? The one additional step of offer pending. And if we were to look at the map, right? We come down here, we see, okay, great. If I look at things that go, these 259 that go into offer pending, they're sitting there for an average of 2 days and 19 hours before they move to the next step. So this piece here, things that go into an offer pending, right? It's slowing us down almost by an average of 3 days. So we might want to just focus in on those 259 and understand why we have to go into that offer pending state. So I can narrow it down to just those, and then come over here to my breakdowns again and start digging into those a little bit deeper. So very useful way to see if there's anything within a process that we might be able to cut or pull out. So 3 high-level examples of one of rework, one of the ping pong, and one of the extra step automated findings. Now let's jump over and just look at those configuration records. So where does this get configured? Well, we can come over here to our process configurations. If we open up process configurations, you're going to see that we have a record for every one of the tables that we've chosen to mine in this case. And let's just open up the incident process configuration. And you'll notice this is kind of as the hub. If you're not familiar with the process configuration, it's the hub of what you would configure, all the different things you would configure for a given process that you want to mine. You'd set up your automated root cause analysis fields here, your automation discovery taxonomy here, any sort of cluster analysis configuration you want to do gets set up here. The rule-based finding definitions that come with the content packs and the ones that you create on your own, you do that here as well. And then you'll notice now in Vancouver, you have an additional tab called automated finding definitions. And this is where you configure those. You see that I've already created a bunch for the examples that we've looked at in a little demonstration here, but let's just create a new one real quick so you can see what that looks like. Maybe we want to create one that looks at rework on the priority field, right? We want to find situations where priorities are being swapped or changed quite frequently in the process. We can choose our rework type. We'll choose our category. I guess if the priority is changing or bouncing back and forth more than once, maybe that's a conformance issue. So let's flag it as conformance. What field do we want to apply this to? Let's apply it to our priority field. And then what KPIs would this impact, right? Again, not required, but maybe we want to, add a KPI of MTTR to help bucket it on that summary and insights page. And we'll hit submit, or we can say save. And once we save this, you'll notice that our parameter screen comes up here. So one is the max finding. So how many examples of rework on priority do you want to show in that summary and insights page once we run the model? And then our minimum repetitions. What's the least amount of times that something has to change priority or have the priority change before we flag it or go into a certain priority? So let's say more than 2 times or 2 times or more goes into the priority of critical, right? That would be something that would be flagged here. We can update this. It would be there and away we go. Now, I do want to show you one other thing as part of this, because this is a little bit of change in Vancouver. How do we get these findings or automated findings into a project? So we'll come here, we'll create a new project, we'll say incident, and we'll just hit save. We'll choose our table like we always do. And we'll say incident. Choose our table of incidents. Of course, we'll say active is false. But this isn't important because I'm not actually going to hit the mine button today, but you always want to make sure you're mining closed records. And then we hit save. In this case, let's just add our activity of priority. So we'd be looking for priority changes on the map. I'm not going to add any breakdowns because the point of me going through this exercise for you is just to kind of show you now. Prior to Vancouver, once you pick that table of incident, anything from that process configuration record would be pulled in, right? We would already start seeing our finding definitions here. No longer the case, right? Now what you have to do is you have to hit this import process finding templates. And what it's going to do is it's going to go out, it's going to look at that process configuration record and then pull in the process finding definitions or the ones that were more rule-based, as well as the automated finding definitions that we had at that in the process configuration level. And then once you're here, you can open up any one of these automated findings. And let's say that we want to look for things that are going into a certain priority more than 3 times. You can actually adjust the parameters at the project level. You don't have to always adjust them at the process level. So I just wanted to show you that a little example, because that's something that is a little bit different in Vancouver. You might be creating a project. You're like, hey, where are my automated findings? Just make sure that you've imported them into the project that you're mining. All right, I think that's what I wanted to cover in the instance. Let's jump over and see if anybody's got any questions. So if you had questions about anything that we covered, could you please put them in the, oh, looks like we had questions, put them in the Q&A in the chat, but I'll just read them aloud. Thank you, Jeroen, for answering the questions as I was presenting. It's always good to have you here with me, but there's a question, in case of rework, what about those scenarios where we intentionally want work to go to A to verify or for B? Yep, this could be fine. Like not all the findings. So this is the situation, the automated findings, and this is also a thing about service management, right? We design for both completeness and efficiency. So there are going to be situations where those things should be happening, but there's also going to be situations where they shouldn't be happening. So the idea is that maybe you want to adjust the parameter to see the situations where that thing is happening more than once. Like things that are going into a waiting call or info 3, 4, 5 times, there's got to be something that we could be doing better there, right? Like if there's a high volume of those situations in a certain category of ticket, like what can we be doing better? Is there something that we can improve to improve the intake experience? So yeah, some of these situations are going to be totally valid, but identifying situations where, or calling these things out, I always like to compare these automated findings to kind of like a dating app. Like we're going to surface a bunch of things. You can choose to swipe left or swipe right on them, but we're just making you aware that these things are going on. Can we also look at the actions that we need to take for these process gaps? And yep, so I think the idea here, if I'm understanding the question, is like, hey, we're identifying these situations, like what are the next steps or actions that we should be taking? Totally. There's lots of different ways to continue to dig into the data and look for the types of things that you should be doing. As Jeroen pointed out in the answer in the Q&A, there's things like root cause analysis or cluster analysis to help us look at the short descriptions and the descriptions, the unstructured data around these tickets to help us kind of dig deeper into the data. This solution, process mining, is all about kind of narrowing the data down to where there might be opportunities and continuing to then have a conversation with the data to ask it additional questions, get additional answers to help you understand what actions you could be taking inside of it. So there's other things, we didn't cover them in the session here today, but if you go back and look at some of the other prior Academy sessions there's specific sessions about how to use the solution and different aspects of the solutions to identify next best action or things that you should be following up on. Perfect. Does anybody else have any additional questions that they didn't put in the Q&A as of yet? All right, as we wait, I'll give you a couple more minutes to get some questions in. Just some additional resources above and beyond what we covered here today. So just for those that are not aware, there is a Now Learning course out there on the Now Learning site called Process Optimization Essentials. We're in the process of updating that and renaming it, but there is a course there that gives you some of the basic foundational information that you need. We, of course, use process mining here at ServiceNow, and the team, our Now on Now team, has written a really good white paper around how we've approached process mining from an organizational perspective, and then some of the initial findings that we had across, I think, 5 processes that they documented in here. There's a community forum page. You probably already know that. That's likely the way that you found how to register for this session here. But if you've not found it, go to the ServiceNow community or community.servicenow.com, search for process mining. It'll take you to the forum. We check this every single day for questions and feedback from our customers. So if you've got a question that you don't want to answer or ask here, please post it on that site. We'll answer it as quickly as possible. And there's tremendous amount of content out there for you on that page to learn more. One of those things are these Process Mining Academy sessions. As I mentioned earlier, this is our 20th Academy session. So there's lots of other recordings of different aspects of the solution, right? Like the question that we just had in terms of like, how do I figure out kind of, now that I've narrowed it down, what types of things I potentially could do to act on this? Whole session on kind of how you dig into the data using root cause analysis to help you do that type of thing. So go out, check out those other Academy sessions. The other thing that's out there that we're trying to supplement these Academy sessions with is we recognize that process mining might be a new muscle for many of our customers, but there's common types of things that you would use process mining to ask and answer. So we've started this use case series, which is a series of 5-minute videos focused on a specific type of analysis that you might want to do, like SLA breach analysis, or that example of work that's taking longer to route than to resolve. We just recently posted a use case that was focused on how do you use process mining to identify approval bottlenecks in the process. So I think there's 8 of those out there now. And there's the use cases that you're interested in us doing a quick little how-to on, please post to the community site and we'll follow up with that. And then the last thing that I'll leave you with is this Live on Now session. So in terms of this is a good session to watch if you want to focus in on what plugins do I need to turn on? How do I create my first project? And kind of what is the vocabulary of process mining? We cover all of that in that Live on Now session. With that, I'll give you guys, the group, one more chance to ask some questions. Any questions, please put them in the Q&A. Anything that we haven't answered yet? There is a question about the slide deck. The slide deck gets posted to the community site. So if you go to the process, I would say the fastest way, Google ServiceNow Process Mining Academy. It'll take you to the Process Mining Academy page with all 20 recordings that are there, or all the session recordings that are there. If you drill into any one of the sessions, we've attached a PDF of the PowerPoint deck in each of the individual sessions. So I usually get the recording out the day of this. So we, you know, give me a few hours. I got a few more things on the calendar here today, but it'll be posted at some point today on the community site, and the deck will be attached to this session. So that's where you can go pick that up. Any other questions? Last chance for romance. Get those questions in. Just so you know, today is we're doing our automated findings deep dive. The last Process Mining Academy session for this year will be in December. We're targeting December 15th. And we've had many requests for a session on multi-dimensional maps. So those maps where let's say we're looking at a requested item and the SE tasks associated with it, or an HR lifecycle event that's got that high-level case and then the subtask. So we'll spend the last session of the year on those multi-dimensional maps. There's been a lot of enhancements made to them over the last couple of releases, so it's a good time to dig into how we configure those and then how we interpret those maps and where you potentially could use them. So that's going to be the session for 12/15, and that'll be the last one for the year. With that, any last-minute questions? If not, really appreciate your attendance as always, and look forward to your questions on the community or meeting you in person at some point at some event. And don't ever hesitate to reach out. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.